Hello, everyone, and welcome to Eternalism in a Nutshell. My name is David, and the title of this episode is There Are Only Two Churches, Two Kingdoms, and Two Philosophies. Part 2, Praxis. This is episode 13. In Part 1, we covered the theoretical framework for our discussion as to why there are only two churches, two kingdoms, and two philosophies. In Part 2, then, we will turn to the praxis, meaning the practical application of this material to cultural Marxism and woke activism. Let's begin things here with a quick review of our argument as to why there are only two churches, two kingdoms, and two philosophies in the world. And that is because there is only one reality, and only two ways of relating to that reality, which is compliance or defiance, leading to the win-lose proposition of compliance you win and defiance you lose. This is the case because there is no third way, no middle way between compliance and defiance, for it is one or the other, and it is this compliance with or defiance of this one reality that will unite and divide us into two opposing forces, both spiritual and temporal, which leads us back and explains why there are only two churches, two kingdoms, and two philosophies in the world. In Part 2, then, we will turn to the praxis, meaning the practical application of this material to cultural Marxism and woke activism. And since it is Pride Month, we will apply this theme of compliance or defiance of reality to queer Marxism by noting that Pride Month is better understood as Defiance Month, as these queer and woke activists openly challenge traditional American, Christian, and Latter-day Saint standards and values. Not only do they seek to redefine the nuclear family, advocating for same-sex marriage, and challenging heterosexual norms, but they have turned Pride Month into the celebration of deviance. This has led to debates on public decency, cultural norms, and the blatant grooming of children by drag queens and other sexual deviants. Ironically, this is not a proud day or month for America, as we wake up to discover the pride flag prominently displayed at the White House South entrance. It hangs between two American flags, symbolizing a message to the world that America has been captured and conquered by a counterculture. However, regardless of this disgraceful display of hubris, one undeniable fact remains, for when it comes to reality, in the end, it is compliance you win, defiance you lose. This is not a threat, but rather an inevitable outcome, for reality always has the final say. Allow me to explain. Let me start by addressing a question that we often hear from queer Marxists and woke activists. Why should I care if two people of the same sex love each other? After all, love is love, and as long as it involves consenting adults and doesn't harm others, why should it matter? Now, the answer I provide might surprise you, or even puzzle you, but it ultimately applies to any moral or ethical question. Now, the truth is that I may care, God may care, friends, family, and parents may care, but, and here is the surprise, reality doesn't care. Let me repeat that. Reality does not care if two people of the same sex love each other and engage in a sexual relationship, nor does it care whether they are consenting adults or if their relationship causes harm to themselves or others. Reality simply is what it is, and is unaffected one way or the other by our actions. We are affected, but it isn't. And if a society foolishly chooses transnormativity over heteronormativity as its cultural, social, and moral ideal, it is still reality that has the final say on the matter, and that final say is both straightforward and non-negotiable. That is, compliance you win, defiance you lose. Think of it this way. Reality is like a red-hot stove or electric element. It can boil water, burn your hand, heat the room, or accidentally start a fire. But when it comes to all these things, the red-hot stove does not care what church you attend, what kingdom you belong to, or what philosophy you have. It simply is what it is. Nor does the red-hot stove care what race you are, what sex you are, or what gender you identify with. It simply is what it is. One can verify this by comparing the kitchens of a heterosexual couple and a transgender couple. Upon doing so, it becomes evident that the red-hot stove or electric element will not behave differently towards one couple or the other. In other words, it will not refuse to boil water for the transgender couple while boiling water for the heterosexual couple, as reality remains unaffected by such factors. At this point, one might ask, where do God, humanity, and morality enter the picture? Well, let's begin with God. God enters the picture as the master builder and as the guiding and organizing force behind these eternal realities that exist independent of God and man. And as such, we worship God, not reality, because unlike reality, which simply is what it is, God is a glorified personal being who cares about us and advances his own glory in the eternal worlds by advancing ours. To provide you with a sense of where I am coming from, let me share a few words from Elder John A. Witzel, an apostle, scholar, scientist, theologian, and church leader, who had a great deal to say about these eternal realities, laws, principles, and relationships that we have been discussing. Under the heading of Gospel Based on Eternal Realities, we read the following. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints deals with eternal realities. The gospel is founded on tangible and eternal things and relationships. The great laws of nature are immutable, and even God cannot transcend them. In God's plan for life on earth is a system of laws representing eternal realities to which man and God must conform. And under the heading of God is the Master Builder, we read the following. This whole doctrine means that God is the organizer of worlds and all upon them. He is not the creator of the materials and forces of the universe, for they are eternal. He is the Master Builder who uses the simple elements of nature for his purposes. What this means, then, is that God enters the picture as the Master Builder. By mastering these eternal materials and forces, not through defiance, but by compliance. Consequently, Elder Witzel proclaims, God himself, a part of nature, is not the creator of nature, but the organizer and director of it. Humanity enters the picture under the same terms as God. That is, compliance you win, defiance you lose. As expressed by Elder Witzel in these words, to enter into the fullness of progressive joy, a man must, as has been said, subject himself to the laws of the universe. In God's plan for life on earth is a system of laws representing eternal realities to which man must conform. And so once again we encounter this recurring theme of compliance you win and defiance you lose. Morality enters the picture once God and humanity enter the picture, with the rock of reality serving as its foundation, and God's voice as the voice of reality declaring from the heavens as to what constitutes compliance or defiance of these eternal realities. hence the Church of Compliance, the Kingdom of Compliance, and the Philosophy of Compliance, as mentioned previously. However, in matters of morality, God's life, or eternal life, serves as the standard by which all things are judged. That which promotes eternal life, joy, and happiness is the good, and that which leads to everlasting death, sorrow, and misery is the evil. Even in our mortal existence, we can observe how this interplay of compliance and defiance unfolds. Take, for example, the hot stove. It is beneficial when you use it to boil water or heat a room, but it becomes detrimental when we accidentally burn our hand or carelessly start a fire. It is crucial to note that the hot stove itself is neither inherently good nor bad. Instead, it is our compliance with the laws of reality that yields favorable outcomes, while defiance of these laws leads to harm and unfavorable consequences. Now, before we delve back into the topics of queer Marxism, Pride Month, and the counter-cultural war currently engulfing our country, we must address an important aspect of reality and morality: sexuality. Let us turn to that now. Sexuality, as an aspect of reality related to human nature, is like a red-hot stove, in the sense that it too can be either a blessing or a curse, depending on whether one complies with or defies the laws of life associated with it. After all, sexuality can unite the sexes as originally intended, that is, within the bonds of marriage and heterosexual relationships. However, it can also be used to defy the laws of life, as is expressed in same-sex marriages and relationships. Likewise, sexuality can undermine a marriage when one spouse dishonors their marital vows and temple covenants by engaging in extramarital affairs. Sexuality can also create confusion when society openly questions the relationship between one's biological sex at birth and one's gender roles as males and females. For example, here we have Britain's first transgender family, with Greg on the right, a transgender man with a beard, and partner Jody, along with Greg's 5-year-old daughter, Jaden, who is actually a boy. Now, suggesting that a 5-year-old child is aware of the life-altering sexual transition he is undergoing is preposterous at best and criminal at worst. Nonetheless, we are told that this 5-year-old child knows he is not really a boy, as many wrongly suppose, but actually a girl. And in the midst of all this confusion, it is claimed that it is the parent's role to affirm him in that gender identification, even though he is but 5 years old. And in the state of California, they have recently signed a bill that if parents do not do so, they could be held liable for child abuse. Now, here is a question I would like to ask all those lawmakers and parents who are in a rush to both affirm and legalize the sexual transitioning of little children. How is it possible that a Supreme Court Justice nominee doesn't even know what a woman is, while apparently a 5-year-old boy transitioning to a girl does? Yes, it's true. During her confirmation hearings, a Supreme Court Justice nominee was asked to define what a woman is, and she responded by claiming that she wasn't qualified to do so, thereby avoiding the question altogether. Now, if a fully grown woman and Supreme Court Justice nominee is not qualified to define what a woman is, then how can a 5-year-old boy be qualified to do so? This inconsistency reflects the absurdity of the world we are currently living in, and the tyrannical nature of this cultural Marxism and woke activism that we are expected to bow down to. In addition to the confusion just mentioned, sexuality can also result in the conception of a child, or lead to the decision to abort a child, in the name of pro-choice rather than pro-life, as well as in the name of individual autonomy and the argument of my body, my choice. Of course, this pro-choice argument is individual autonomy without individual responsibility, as responsibility itself is often viewed as oppressive by many woke activists and college graduates today. As a result, the pro-choice movement has gained widespread acceptance, resulting in nearly 73 million induced abortions worldwide each year. To provide some perspective, the death toll of the Jewish Holocaust was just under 10 million. And so we see that at the end of the day, when it comes to the laws of life associated with this sexuality, it is once again compliance you win, defiance you lose. Only in the case of abortion, it is 73 million unborn and innocent babies who are losing their lives each year. Now, I believe I have shown enough for you to realize that sexuality is indeed like a red-hot stove, and that establishing acceptable sexual norms within a society is imperative. In fact, it takes the combined efforts of family, schools, churches, customs, traditions, and laws to establish limits, boundaries, and self-governing constraints upon such a powerful and fundamental attribute as human sexuality. So, what I would like to point out is that up until recently, this traditional and needed sexual norm in the Western world was commonly known as heteronormativity. Heteronormativity refers to the belief, rooted in the biblical, traditionally Christian, and American values, that heterosexuality is the norm or default sexual orientation. It further asserts that relationships and behaviors should adhere to traditional gender roles, including expectations of opposite-sex attraction, marriage between a man and a woman, and procreation within a family setting. In short, I will be referring to heteronormativity in this series of episodes as denoting or relating to a worldview that promotes heterosexuality as the normal or preferred sexual orientation. For example, the biblical or Christian worldview. Today, however, this biblical and traditional Christian worldview of heteronormativity is being challenged and even displaced by what I am going to refer to as transnormativity. Not in its technical sense, but in a far broader and comprehensive sense. That is, as denoting or relating to a worldview that promotes homosexuality, transsexuality, and pansexuality as the normal or preferred sexual orientation. For example, the worldview of the entire LGBTQ+ community. Now, the reason I am using transnormativity rather than any of the other non-heterosexual options is because once you have normalized transsexuality, you have effectively normalized all these other options as well. After all, outside of normalizing pedophilia and bestiality, there isn't much further a degenerating society can go. In any case, I will be referring to heteronormativity as compliance with reality, in the sense of a reality-based morality, and I will be referring to transnormativity, along with all the other non-heterosexual options, as defiance of reality, meaning defiance of any reality-based morality. Now, it is important to note that this defiance of reality, in the sense of a reality-based morality, has been going on for decades, beginning with the negation of morality, with the deceptive and popular ethical notion of, who am I to judge another? And even more recently, the negation of reality as well, with the equally misleading and metaphysical notion of, who am I to gender another? Now, as disturbing and outrageous as these images of defiance might be, there are still many who will find nothing wrong with them, and still others who would argue that the distinction between what constitutes compliance with reality and defiance of it is hard to decipher. And so I have chosen to expose you to 3 sets of images that are progressively disturbing and yet revealing of where we are heading as a society as we reject the normality and sanity of heteronormativity for the insanity and abnormality of transnormativity. In short, I want to provide a clear distinction between what compliance with reality looks like and what defiance of reality looks like, and with the added footnote in each instance that in our politics and advocacy for this or that agenda, we are either cheering on compliance with reality or cheering on defiance of reality. So as you observe these progressively disturbing images, I urge you to consider which side of this cultural war you wish to align yourself with, for it is one or the other, and there is no middle way, as many falsely suppose. On the left, we have an image of the nuclear family, consisting of a heterosexual couple with 2 children, enjoying a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. On the other side, we have a transsexual family, where a transgender man with a beard is depicted on the right, becoming pregnant and giving birth to the youngest of their 3 children shown here. His gay spouse, who is the biological father, is also present. The first 2 children in this transgender family were adopted. Thus, we are presented with clear images of what compliance looks like and what defiance looks like, and clear choices as well. But it gets worse. By worse, I mean even more confusing, if that's possible. On the left side, we have an image depicting a traditional heterosexual couple standing together, with the supportive husband affectionately caressing his pregnant wife. However, on the other side, we have the spectacle of a transgender man who is a pregnant woman assuming the role of the husband, and a transgender woman who is a man assuming the role of his wife, and who is also the biological father. Once more, there should be no question as to what compliance with reality looks like, or what defiance looks like. Of course, the crucial question is, which of these contrasting worldviews do you want to embrace and raise your children and grandchildren in? Now, the next image is truly hard to stomach, but until we, as a society, wake up to the reality of what's coming our way, like a fast-moving trans train, the more of these images we need to be exposed to. With these 2 images, the contrast between compliance and defiance of reality could not be clearer. Given images like the one on the right side, one has to wonder why this choice between heteronormativity and transnormativity is even on the table in a Christian nation such as America. Is this the social, moral, and cultural environment you want to pass down to your children and grandchildren? I think not. But that is certainly the direction we are heading in with this queer Marxism and woke activism that is overtaking our country. Now, if we keep our school children in mind and go back to the original question of why I should care if 2 people of the same sex love each other, we can give a definitive answer, and that is this. I care because social norms matter, because compliance or defiance of reality matters, and because people's actions and choices spill over into the larger society. They spill over into our homes, into our schools, into our churches, and into our streets, as is evidenced by Pride Month. Again, why should I care if 2 people of the same sex love each other? Because our children matter, And it's hard to imagine a world in which family prayer is followed up by drag queen story hour. Finally, if you want to hold an image in your mind of what we are fighting for in this cultural war against queer Marxism, woke activism, and the entire LGBTQ plus movement, then keep the innocence, vulnerability, and purity of our primary age children in mind. Do so as a daily and godly reminder in these turbulent times that compliance or defiance of reality matters, that people's actions and choices matter, because they spill over into the larger society, and that therefore social norms matter, and most importantly, that the future of our children matters. Thank you for watching. Push the like button if you enjoyed this episode, and be sure to push the subscribe button. Until next time, consider the gravity of these perilous times, and remember that our children and grandchildren are depending on us to get this right, and to leave them a world wherein they at least have a fighting chance.